Sarthak, welcome to the Last Wicket. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Nice to be here, man. Thanks for calling me over. Wonderful. Bit of a bummer with last evening's game. But yes, enjoying the World Cup so far. It's been a really good, close, tight World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of thrillers we've already had. I think two rained out games, including last night, or maybe three. I'm losing count, but yeah, there's a few rained out games. But other than that, I think we've had some really good games. But before we get into the cricket and the performance of the team, I know you visited Vizag and attended India's game. So just share with us what your experience was like.
Yes, I went to watch India versus Australia at Vizag. I wanted to catch both the games that week, which is India, South Africa, and India, Australia. Both were in Vizag, of course. But I think I got caught up midway, so could only go for Australia. The game was outstanding. I guess I'll come to that in a second. Uh, it very weirdly, given what we'd been reading about Guwahati and how much buzz there was in terms of hoardings, in terms of radios and everything else, kind of building up the World Cup. We didn't find much in Vizag, as in there were two inflatable, like two balloons, stringed high in the sky, which you could see from the beach, but sorry, from the drive from the airport to Greater Vizag, which is where the stadium is near the Rushikonda beach, we didn't find a single hoarding about the World Cup. The cab driver knew about the games, but he kind of knew it because he must have read it somewhere or something like that. But there was no kind of hype, so to speak. And even on the day of going to the game, the closest you got to hype was the, replica jersey vendors placed maybe a mile outside the stadium. And that's when the first time you got to hear or see things about the World Cup, and which I felt was a bit odd for a station that hosts a lot of cricket. Vizag gets a fair amount of
Right.
cricket, men and women, and what also compounded the surprise was just the turnout for the game was outstanding. The crowd filled up, I would say,
Yep.
by an hour and a half. By the 20th over, it was quite packed. It was loud. It was noisy. At many times when the MC interrupted, it felt like he didn't need to in terms of there was enough noise.
Hmm.
So a mix of good and bad, I would say, where inside the stadium, the vibe was excellent. The crowd was, obviously supportive of the national team, but there was enough appreciation for Australia as well. There were some Indian fans who were dressed up in Australian colors and they were cheering for the Australians, which is great. So yeah, I wish there was a little more so that maybe the fans who weren't clued in could also get into that buzz. But great experience inside the stadium. It's a nice stadium. It's small, but it's a really nice stadium.
That's really good insight. I was curious, just there's been a lot of discussions before the World Cup started on whether the venues were correctly selected, whether some venues like Delhi, for example, which has shown full houses for some of the women's Premier League games, was not selected. So there's a lot of talk about that. Now that you've attended Vizag, or now that the World Cup is underway and you've seen some games on TV as well, what are your thoughts on that discussion with all this new information?
It's a good question actually, because the World Cup has been pretty decently attended. Not all games, and it's very hard to. I mean, you keep midweek weekday games. Also, it's a
Right.
lot of it is clashed with Navratri, and that's festive time, so people want to spend their time with family. So that asterisk has to be put. Like for India's first game in Guwahati, the tournament opener, the crowd was substantial until say midway through the evening, by which time they had to go out because it was, I think, Ashtami night, and that night is a pious night in our cultures. So you always, regardless of what else is going on, you want to kind of spend time with family. So keeping all that in mind, it has been a well attended World Cup, but there is the reason for a lot of that discourse prior to the tournament was in A, the intent of giving the right venues, B, how have you picked these venues? Because earlier there was also New Chandigarh that was picked. and Bangalore was a later addition before it got obviously taken
Right.
off the roster. Now, thing is, New Chandigarh Stadium has just been built. You haven't had the chance to before the Australia ODI series, just before the World Cup. You haven't had the chance to test out the appetite for the women's cricket game. Now, I think we've gone far enough in the evolution of the sport to understand that the dynamics and the mechanics and the kinetics of it is slightly different from the men's game. It's no
Right.
less fun or dramatic, but it's just you have to watch it kind of. You can't compare the cover drive of a Nadine de Klerk or a Chamari Patu from last night. Man, wow, I can do a podcast with you on Chamari itself. But yeah, to say a Marco or a Kohli cover drive, it's just not fair neither.
Yeah.
And so just the up to there are some stations through the WPL and through a lot of the women's games that have been tested for the appetite. So when you're having a World Cup in either format for the first time after 9 years, I think the last women's World Cup was in 2016 in India. I think so. When you're having that for the first time, go to the grounds which will not only fill up, but grounds that will actively participate in the game, right? That's what we want, not just numbers, but crowds that will be the 12th person, that will be the 12th man. And honestly, I think between you and me, we don't really care if they're parochial. We just want them loud and noisy and participating in the game. Regardless, because with India's cricket audience, when you're doing it in Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, and not just to name the major cities, there are also like non-major stations that do well. What you're getting it is a World Cup that feels like a World Cup and a major event. And there were murmurs that a lot of the Guwahati crowd came because there was a tribute plan for Zubeen Garg, which
Right.
is important, of course, and it's very very important because Assam lost something very very close to their heart. But all things considered, the picking of venues I do think could have been better. Two stations that have a deep, deep understanding, knowledge, and appreciation for the women's game. And I'm saying only this for the World Cup. For an ODI
Right.
series, for a T20 series, please take it to stations that are new. You create the hype, you create the buzz, expose them to the women's game, make them appreciate it. But when you're playing a major tournament, this is your chance to make it, loud and boisterous in all the right ways, and the intent was never there. And that was shown from the first list of venues where in that essay that I think I did, I think there's one that Sharda did before. I was talking to Sharda that a lot of these stations, for example, was it Indore, was it Gwalior, they had never hosted women's game. Like the last game in one of those stations was 20 years back. New Chandigarh had never hosted a game. It was a new stadium.
Right.
uh, I think Trivandrum has never hosted a women's game. So if you're taking it to these stations, there will be obvious teething problems, rightly so. So that showed that the intent was never there. And it's to the crowd's credit that they have really turned up and they've supported the game.
Absolutely. It is nice to see, crowds coming in. I think Rahul Dravid had once, when talking about the future of Test cricket, said the 2001 partnership with DVS Lakshman would not mean the same if it was in front of empty stands at the Eden Gardens. So it really does add a lot to the game, even if they are partisan. And yeah, it's great to see that they're turning out despite all the issues we've had with ticket releases and all of that, which we won't get into. The only other question I'll ask you about your
Can I
stadium
interrupt you for
watching.
1 second? Can I
Sure,
interrupt
sure.
you for one
Yeah, yeah,
second?
of course.
Because since I'm so sorry, but since you mentioned the Dravid Lakshman partnership, and since you were discussing venues, can I tell you and the audience this, that since March 2001, which was that week of the partnership, the final ball of Harbhajan to McGrath, India and Australia have not played a test match in Calcutta.
And they've been here 7 times, maybe six
There's
times at
seven,
least.
eight times. I think
That's crazy.
they've played one at Wankhede, uh,
Wow.
and they have not played at Eden Gardens a single test match since that day, which is just wild. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I know it's a tangent, but it is annoying how poorly we manage. We look at somewhere here. I have a ball from Lords right here. and it talks about being the home of cricket, and they like talk about legacy and history, and they market it so well, even if some of it is exaggerated. And I think we go to the other end of not preserving the history and legacy that some of these stadiums have. So it's a little disappointing. I understand your digression, but I guess the only other question I have on your stadium watching experience is, what was it like as in terms of facilities? That's been always a concern. I know in the WPL,
Mm,
initially there were issues with women's washroom being closed, which makes no
yeah.
sense. Any such insights from Isaac?
Um, Okay, I'm cautious of giving a strong opinion here. Reason being, when the tickets were being released, they released in I think three batches. First was the 100 rupee tickets for the general stand, which we all bought. That was like the first go, and you wanted to attend the game. Then there was I think a couple of more stands opened, which were about 150 rupees, and something similar, maybe 250. And then I think 3 days before the game, they released tickets for the pavilion terraces, so to speak, just above the dugouts, and they were priced at 2,500 rupees. And usually for an ODI game, if you're having a World Cup at your city, you obviously, you just want to go. But this being a World Cup game against Australia, against obviously, probably the greatest team cricket has ever seen, the Australian women's team. Me and my friend, we didn't mind spending 2,500 and to go. We thought it was worth. And the facilities inside were outstanding. The food was on the house. The washrooms were clean. But I also won't want to generalize that for the rest of the stadium. I haven't heard uh, any problematic reports or any tweets that said that the facilities were bad or something. But obviously, we shouldn't assume that they weren't.
Yeah,
In our stand, they were pretty nice, and I think we were expecting them to be because they were just
premium
above
seats.
the
Yeah,
dressing rooms and the dugout, so they were pretty premium that way.
yeah,
They were not hospitality, but they were pretty premium. And that bit Indian stadiums do well. Their premium seating and their premium facilities are always decent. And that is also a problem where they do it for the premium seats and they don't do it for the rest of the stadium. But yeah, I haven't read or heard anything. And maybe, over the World Cup, we can ask more people and we'll get a better idea of how the facilities have been.
totally fair. Totally fair. Um, let's talk about the coverage as well. One of the things that I've noticed, and again, this is maybe me being, not as well informed about the women's game a few years ago. But one thing I've seen is just the amount of online writers that are covering the game. Obviously there's a sense of mainstream media covering it, but just the data availability platforms like Substack have had such a great influence because just with the time zones, I've been missing a lot of games, or at least watching only highlights. But the ability to just go back and figure out, oh, wait, Australia did really well by bowling all these slower balls and using the pitch better, like that just enhances the game, even if you've not watched it live. What are your thoughts on the level of reporting and the coverage that is going on in this World Cup?
Outstanding, man. And I do think the women's cricket game has a lot of really good coverage. Like the people I can, rattle off the top of my head, they cover the women's game regularly. Like they're very dedicated reporters who also happen to be at this World Cup. And for example, I'd like to shout out Vinayak, I think from Indian Express. There's Lavanya from
Mhm.
Sportstar, Gomesh from New Indian Express. There's who else? Samreen from Hindustan Times. Um, and obviously Tarutra, who runs Best of Cricket Stories, who does these data articles, and who's really put an effort to say that okay, we don't. These guys are doing great coverage. We don't want to kind of relay the story. Let's use data to find out what happened for real. And a lot of these guys, like a Vinayak or a Lavanya or a Gomesh, they are not only giving us match reports to read if you've missed a match, but a lot of their coverage are stories of people. And two reports that have stayed with me are both by Gomesh actually. One is an Amanjot story, and one is of Tasneem Brits, and excellently researched, excellently covered. So these are reporters who generally cover women's cricket really well, and they are your safe bets if you are ever wanting to get into the game after the World Cup, before another tournament. So I've been very happy with the coverage, but not surprised, I'll be honest. These guys are exceptional. Um, and it's one thing that I do think happens with the women's cricket game, at least for now, is the people who cover it do it out of sincerity and love for the sport, and not necessarily to come across as adjacent to a celebrity. So they do it because they really know about the game, they know about the sports dynamics, they know about the people who play it. You can see that the players and coaches seem to have an easy relationship with them. These guys are getting to ask tough questions. For example, and we'll come to that when we discuss India's performance. They've not just gone to the pressers and they've asked, how does it feel to win? What does the crowd look like? They've asked tough questions about good and bad things in performance, what could be better, what could be not. Yeah, I think they've always kind of done it from the point of we care about the sport, we care about the people who play the sport, and it's really flourished during the World Cup because there are just so many stories. And in fact, the ICC team too, the ICC digital media team has done a superb job. There is a video they've put out of Marufa Akhtar last night. It's heartbreaking, but it is so well done. It's done tastefully. It's never done in a patronizing manner. It's done very tastefully.
Yeah, I will admit that even BCCI's website surprised me this time, where they had good stories covering. I
I
think it was
agree.
Sneh Rana in one. Harleen Deol had a feature as
Yeah,
well, which was pretty nice to see because we
they've
don't
sent
get to
video
see
editors
that.
there.
Yes, yes. So they've
Yeah,
done a good job this time. So that has been great to watch. So both from, just a big media perspective, as well as some of the writers that you mentioned, some of the bloggers that you mentioned, they've been doing a great job. I think the one difference that I do notice is, and I think you hit it on the head when you said this, that these people have covered women's cricket for a while. I think in the 2017 World Cup, if I try to look back, there were very few people who actually could watch as much women's cricket at that point. It was not on
yeah,
TV as much, so their knowledge was limited. So I think the coverage suffered because of that as well. They obviously had the right intent, but many of them or most of them had the right intent, but they just didn't have enough background on the game. And I think I was of that mindset as well. I would constantly, when I was trying to watch the game back in 2017, 2018, I would constantly compare it to men's because that is what I knew. And having like seen a lot
100%.
more women's cricket, I think, as you said, you appreciate the differences and you appreciate the way the game moves a little better.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think the amount of data that's there has helped because now a lot of the coverage, like you very rightly said, has moved to instead of just narratives, which are always nice to hear, but there is also that critical eye that you get in the coverage of people discussing some very deep tactical stuff. Um, but there's also this thing of you now see reporters who are so well enmeshed within the women's game that they're now able to almost spread their own wings, that we can write this story and we can write that story, and it's just the breadth and of the range of stories that we've gotten. It's an ecosystem obviously that's constantly maturing, but it's a really good ecosystem so far. And I did see some content creators and reel makers at the stadium, unfortunately, and I hope they're kept away for as long as possible. I don't know how long that's going to happen, but
Yeah.
so far the ecosystem is there is a lot of sincerity to the coverage ecosystem.
That's good to hear, and I do hope that the fan clubs and stands and all of that bullshit stays away, which has unfortunately taken over the Indian men's team, at least, if not
Yeah,
other teams outside of India.
yeah,
Let's get into the cricket though. So we'll
let's do
start
it.
with the host nation, of course, the Indian team. We are an India-focused podcast generally, so we'll cover everyone, but we'll talk about them. We obviously started really well. We started with wins, comfortable wins as well, but the last two games have shown some of their shortcomings. Maybe I'll ask, how did you see them before the World Cup? Obviously, Australia have been favorites, but where did you think they ranked overall, apart from Australia?
From a purely ranking perspective, I was having this conversation with my friend. I I felt this team was getting to a place of reaching peak performance. There are some outstanding players, and we'll discuss them. But there were parts of the engine that were still fitting into place. And I have no doubt that they will fit going forward. But you can tell that a lot of the squad is really young. They're playing, their first major tournament. It's a home tournament, so that's an added pressure. And they're learning how this team works. And for example, Pratika and Herleen are both so young that I have no doubts that in 2 years they'll figure out where they're lacking, and the problems that we see today, they will not exist in 2 years' time. And sometimes the team needs that. The biggest example, and I apologize for bringing a men's parallel here, is the France team that hosted the 2016 Euros, men's Euros in football. They reached the finals, but you knew that they were not the finished product. In 2018, when they went to the World Cup, a lot of the same players went and they won, and they just looked so complete. So sometimes the team just needs a little bit of time uh, for the younger players to mature, to get each other's dynamics well. And I really appreciate what the team management has done in bringing a lot of the young talents in. So it never feels like, okay, an old person's club. Kranti Goud made her debut this year in May, just before the
Right.
England tour, right? And they didn't waste time in saying that, okay, should we not? Renuka might get fit before the World Cup, so we don't really need her. They just brought her in, that you're bloody good, just come in. Pratika has just been persisted with. She's done outstandingly well, of course. But you were getting her in and preparing yourself to say that, okay, someone as influential as, with the stature of a Shafali Verma, we might have to also have options. I do see them as very good, but not the finished product, not near. I think in 2 years' time, when there's a T20 World Cup next year, I think they will do well. The next T20 World Cup, which will be in 2028, I think they'll be an outstanding team and one of the favorites to win.
That's totally fair. Yeah, there's definitely a number of early 20s players who are, as you said, playing their first few tournaments or first major tournament for sure. So yes, long road ahead. Nonetheless, I personally thought they would be semi-finalist for sure. I definitely thought they should not, considering home conditions, considering their strength with spin, they would be able to make the most of the conditions and qualify as the top four. Um, but the performances, particularly in the last two games, and to be fair, like in the South Africa game, they had it under control until one amazing innings. Apart from that one amazing innings, I feel like they've had definitely some rough edges that need to be worked on. You mentioned Harleen Deol, you mentioned Raval, and their strike rate, their strike rotation has been something that has been brought up as a concern. Then finishing woes against South Africa, that game almost reminded me, and I'm bringing up a men's comparison now, but in 2011 World Cup, India played South
Mm,
Africa and had a similar situation where they started really well. First 40 overs went really well, and then got bowled out and lost the game.
yeah.
So it pretty much reminded me of that. Although in this game, it felt like the bowlers had it under control. So there's definitely areas of improvement, but I do feel that they have been probably a tad under par, in the sense that there were certainly situations where they could have been a little bit better, both in terms of details like strike rotation or even playing combination. That obviously has been debated quite a bit. So what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I totally agree. I think they've been under par in every game, including Sri Lanka and Pakistan. And sorry, in both games they had to be kind of bailed out a little by the lower order. Richa Ghosh has been superb. Sneh Rana with that innings was outstanding. Aman Jyot has scored. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have to bail you out. The whole point of having batting balance like that is for, you know, everyone has to contribute in a long tournament, and that's fine. But I do agree they've been under par. The batting hasn't. Uh, I think the Australia game was the first time when the top order really, really clicked together. I don't think that's happened so far. In the first three games, that didn't happen. So it left a lot of pressure on the middle order in the middle overs against a team that's not very good in the middle overs. It becomes a bit more complex because had this team been a superb middle overs team, you could have said, okay, even if the top few goes, then we have the muscle to go through the middle overs, which is not the case. Which is not the case for India. They struggle in the middle overs unless Smriti or Pratika play a long innings. Um, and what I was bringing up, even the reportage thing, is a lot of these questions were posed to Amol Mazumdar and Harmanpreet right after the Australia game. They were asked after the South Africa game. And both have been gracious to admit that this is an issue that they are aware of. They haven't hidden from it. And I would hold out hope that through a World Cup, they will. These are not new issues, obviously, they've persisted for a while. But through a World Cup, things have a way of falling into place and doing and just working out.
Right.
So I do think they've been under par. I would look at the bowling slightly with a little more charitable view because a lot of these bowlers are really young bowlers. Yeah. Kranti Gore has just started, obviously. Amanjot is young. And they're missing Renuka at her best. Renuka at her best is a beast. Um, and um, and so I do think that the bowling's done a lot of what they could have. The bowling depth obviously is an issue, which they seem opaque to in the sense that they don't want to change it. And I am fearful that they might change it for one game. And if that game doesn't work out, they'll fall back into the old habits, which is maybe the wrong way to go about it. But yeah, the batting's barring the Australia game, the batting's not been up to scratch.
Yeah, I think on the bowling front, before we talk about the batting, I mean, I completely agree with your points, but I think on the bowling front, it feels to me like last few years Harmanpreet has not been bowling as much. So suddenly trusting herself as that number six option is a big risk.
But she has no
And
options.
Yeah, but she has no other options considering the
Mm.
lineup she's trying to pick. And yes, the batting, if it feels like we've seen glimpses of, consistency. Raval's done well. Smriti Mandhana was before the tournament, like scored the second fastest, not 50, 100 in women's cricket. So clearly they have form on their side, and it's about just clicking. And sometimes in these long tournaments, which we've seen in so many of these World Cups, with the round robin format, teams take a little bit to get into rhythm. So hopefully some of that comes together. But the other feeling that I've gotten is, as I've seen more of the WPL or seen participation from certain Indian players in the 100 or other tournaments like the BBL, is there are clear improvements in certain sections. So I don't think I've ever seen an Indian team field as well as they do. Do they still drop catches? There's an odd stumping that is missed. Yes, of course. But it is a substantially better fielding side than ever before. Um, but to your point, like the middle overs still appear to be an issue. We've improved quite a bit on power hitting. Now we have not just Richa Ghosh down the order who can hit, but Mandana's game has improved quite a bit as a power hitter. And so we have a lot of firepower from that perspective. Deepti Sharma has improved quite a bit as a finisher. So a lot of these things have those improvements have come in, but there's still a lot of fine tuning to be done. I mean, I'm not trying to be critical. I do think they're on the right path, but yeah,
100%.
I think you're to the way you started it. They don't look like a finished team just yet, and that's
Yeah.
where the challenge comes in once they get into the semis.
100%. And I was, you covered the improvement so well that, there has been a very like tangible, very distinct improvement in power hitting, in just the range that like the zones they access when they're power hitting. Look, Smriti's always been a very compact, controlled, very, a very complete batter that way, where she could access the offside. She had that lovely fluid offside kind of drive and
Right.
lofted shots, and she could obviously she's very strong on her leg side. But the more you see is because a lot of the teams are bowling wicket to Indian team, and because their strike rotation is a problem, they're trying to not give them any width or anything on the leg side and just bowl straight, bang straight. But what I've seen, at least in the last 15 overs of India's innings, is along with, I think, Richa down, actually Harman down, Jemima, Richa onwards, they just can access. all the entire field. I think Jemima's first ball against Australia, the ball was on the channel and she stood still and she just touched it for four behind the wicket keeper. So she came ready. She was like, fleet on her feet. Key. Okay, we'll just do this. So that with the improvements has been outstanding, and you'd expect that. You'd expect that out of a team that's constantly improving, that's got people in the leadership who are very ambitious, who want to be the best they can be, and so yeah, full credit to them. They've been superb. The fielding, so funny because there was a misfield on the first ball, if I remember correctly, in the Australia innings. And I think it was Amanjot who made two misfields in the first 2, 3 overs. From there on, the ground fielding was astonishingly good. And it was a credit to them because for the first innings, you were blown away by what you saw of Australia's ground fielding. They are
Right.
Panthers. Those guys are straight up Panthers, and all of them. But and even they had a couple of misfields, a couple of close chances go down. But generally, and the general vibe is if it's in their range, it's not going through. I thought India were also outstanding in the ground fielding. And I think Richa will get a lot more comfortable as a keeper as she plays more. I think she's still on her upward trajectory as a keeper. So yeah, I think that's been very encouraging, like you very rightly said. The WPL, BBL 100, these things naturally have had a very positive impact on this team. I don't think I'm in the position to comment how it has impacted in Australia and in England, who already had such good foundations. But the improvement in the Indian team is very obvious to see.
From Virat Kohli's MCG 6 against Pakistan to Bumrah's stump-destroying Yorker to Ollie Pope. Incredible things happen on the cricket ground. We also get iconic lines off it, like Siraj saying, "I only believe in Jassie Bhai." There are so many incredible moments that cricket fans just never forget. And now you can wear them on your chest. Free Hit Gear has launched a line of amazing t-shirts and hoodie designs. Passionate fans in India can order through their website, freehitgear.com, while fans abroad can use Free Hit Gear on the Etsy store to have items delivered to them. Order now with the code GOODAreas, all one word, to get a limited time 15% discount, and you can wear a t-shirt like this one right here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the advantage that the Aussies and English have, obviously not taking away from their skill and their strategies, the way they execute some of their tactics, but they were just professional way ahead of the game. And so it feels like some of the other teams are often catching up. And speaking of the English and the Kiwis, those are the two next two key battles for India. Hopefully, obviously they'll hope to win both and make sure that they are in the top four, qualifying for the semifinal. At least beat New Zealand. I think that would be, the second best case scenario for them. But what do you think are there chances against those two teams, considering how they're shaping up? Both teams, of course, have a number of, match winners who can, on their day,
Right.
single-handedly just take the game away.
I think India will go into believing that they can beat both, especially because what happened in England this summer. Generally, when they go up against England, there is this thing of, okay, we're good, but they just might come with more ammunition. But they went to England and beat England, which is like a huge deal. So they will go confident. I am just that spell against South Africa by England it's probably going to be the first 10 overs against South Africa. Just the control of and just the differences they brought, all the spinners, just they bowled so differently. The South African batters had nowhere to go, so it just kind of has left a bit of an impact on me. I think there should be confidence that we can beat both. And it's important, whichever way the England match goes, not to obviously, trivialize the challenges New Zealand will bring. But I would like to think if the better they perform against England, the more confidence they will carry against New Zealand and then Bangladesh, which will not be an easy game, by the way Bangladesh has been bowling. The power hitting that their kids have shown in the middle order, Shorna and all. It's not going to be an easy game against Bangladesh. But so they will have to beat definitely one of them and play to their highest potential against the other to carry that confidence into Bangladesh and the semis if it were to happen. Um, and um, and it's a bit naive, bit utopian, but I guess my hope on from then onwards would be just unshackle yourself and just play like the last game in the ODI series where they were chasing 400 against Australia. They just let
Right.
themselves go. They just said, okay, you can't build an innings from here. Let's just go and let's enjoy ourselves. And you had such a great game. You had these players expressing themselves and going for it. I would hope to see after the pressure of the England game, if they play really well, I would think that from the New Zealand game onwards, that freedom of expression would come there. Okay, I think we are good. Let's now hit another gear. Let's see how it goes. It won't be easy because World Cup pitches are different. New Zealand have a lot of experience and they're bowling well. And Bangladesh have been just so impressive. Yeah, they have been so impressive this time.
Absolutely. I think as you mentioned, the win in England. So India won 2-1 in England back in July. They also won against New Zealand last year 2-1 at home. So they'll definitely have that in mind for sure. They have some experience against these sides, and I think they play England more than many of the other sides, anyways. So
Yes.
they definitely have some knowledge about the team that they're playing. I do think sometimes these World Cup runs are made by one win, which
I agree. Yeah.
against a strong team. So I think that England game is a big one. If we can come up with the right answers and just execute the plans better. Of course, it's not easy to change within a World Cup. Some of the issues we've talked about, strike rotation, things like that don't resolve overnight. But I'm sure there are smart people in there who are working and trying to find the best way to optimize whatever strengths
Yeah.
Each of the players have. Um, the other piece that I was going to talk about is really the stars of the talents on display, and you touched on Bangladesh already, so I'll start with Bangladesh. They appear to be maybe it's me, but I think they're the most improved team from what they were, let's say, in 2017. Again, I'm taking 2017 because that's the first World Cup I saw, and that's the time when I really started watching women's cricket. But they, in general, at least in my opinion, appear to be extremely, improving. Like all the other teams have been showing constant improvement. Australia has been sort of another tier altogether throughout this period. But thoughts on Bangladesh and especially like some of the young talents like Marufa Akhtar, who you already mentioned, really exciting pacer.
I've been like, and the more we say it, I guess I don't want it to ever sound patronizing, but the way Bangladesh have even executed, there is a smartness to it. They haven't. Um, uh, okay, I take the opportunity to say I'm not the biggest fan of their men's team because of not because ever there's less skill, so to speak, but how sometimes they execute. They just seem to get carried away and they just seem to lose things to their emotions, which doesn't seem to be the case with the women's team. They've been A, skillful, B, very, very aware of what needs to happen when, like Sharna Akhtar's innings that the other day, she wasn't just whacking, blindly. She took her singles. She was aware when to hit, where to hit. That's why she could play that innings because she was accessing all the right spots. Um, uh, so similarly, I think, look, Marufa's bowling is just, I think, has been the highlight of the tournament. The amount of swing she got, to a lot of the Indian fans who were watching under 19 cricket in the early 2000s, she reminded us of a single person who's probably not played enough international cricket, but the name Anwar Ali, a lot of us won't forget.
2006 final, yes, of
2006
course.
for what he did in Colombo, right? We had to chase 106 and we couldn't because he's Anwar Ali bowled a spell from the high heavens. And you can't bowl that spell. It's impossible. And some of the players who batted in that Indian lineup, those are surprising names to have not chased down 106. So yeah, I think Marufa Akhtar's two balls that day, the first thought to a lot of us, men's cricket fans, so to speak, was, wow, this is straight up Anwar Ali territory. And she's been superb. Rabia Khan has been superb. Uh, so they've definitely been the most improved. I also do think they weren't very good in 2017, or later. So they had a climb to make, and they've made the climb
Right.
to their great credit. I think
Absolutely.
New Zealand. Sorry, please go ahead.
No. Go, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
I think New Zealand are coming to the end of a cycle. What you see with New Zealand, an end of a team iteration, and I think going forward, maybe next year's T20 World Cup could be it for a couple of their players. So you will see kind of a refreshed New Zealand. England just have so many tools here. I mean, I don't think we should have the Australia in this conversation, but England just have so many tools. They have so many ways to, proverbially skin the cat. So they're very, very well stacked. I've liked what I've seen of South Africa. I love Shabnam Ismail, so I'm missing her at this World Cup. But I loved what I've seen of South Africa. I have that century by Tasneem Brits was stunning. So yeah, I think this has been a tournament of superbly high skill, and the kind of pitches has made it better because it's not like in the generally World Cups and major tournaments. You've not got either your minefields or your whackathons. You've got these
Right.
270, 250, 280 games, which are great watches. And maybe the best pitch we saw was the Vizag game against in between India and Australia, where Healy at the toss said that it looks like a wonderful pitch, and it Healy, was it Harman, one of them, that it looks like a
Yeah.
pitch of a lot of runs. So barring that, I think most games have been in that range of 250, 280. And those make for such good one ODI cricket, yeah. So it's been like from a spectator's perspective, it's been great to watch.
Absolutely, and I'll speak a little more on South Africa. It's been a really good comeback for them considering the start. 69 all out, and then they've come back pretty strongly. Nadine de Klerk has now had two match winnings innings. One against India, where honestly,
He was so good.
unexpectedly, yes, she was so good, but it was so unexpected considering she's not necessarily known for her six hitting, and she hit five or six sixes that innings, and then she repeated those a couple of nights ago against Bangladesh to take them home again with I think a three wicket win in the last over. So. Yeah, some really great performances. It feels like, I know there's always players who have talents and who've been around teams, but they're never the main star. But it's been one of the situations where she's made it her World Cup, and been center stage this time with some of the stars like Ismail being absent.
She was also in the reserves, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think she played the World Cup in 22. She obviously has been playing ODI cricket from maybe just before that. But if I remember correctly, she wasn't in the squad in 22. She could have been in the reserves. So that innings against India was outrageous, man. I know that there was a dew in Vizag. It was moist,
Yeah.
so there was precipitation. India ran out of bowling options, so that over from Harmanpreet wasn't obviously. You could say not well timed, but it had to come at some point. She had to go there. There was nowhere else to go. But I think her innings against Bangladesh obviously was a bit sketchy. Great innings, but she gave a chance. Against India, she was flawless, and it's like she walked in and she knew I got this, and she just timed her hits to perfection. I am waiting for a Laura Woolworth special because when she gets post the 30th over, like you sit back and watch that stuff. She scored well. She's been in good touch. And Tasneem Brits could you imagine? I mean, a few years back, somebody telling you that Meg Lanning's records for runs and everything will be broken, and Tasneem Brits has broken that with, I think, most centuries. So no, she's been superb. She's scored what 5-6 centuries this year, and I think from again England and Australia, you kind of are so familiar with what they bring and the skills they bring that you knew what an Alisa Healy could do. Elise Perry is nothing new to anyone who watches women's cricket. So I was almost keyed in on a Phoebe Litchfield and they were warming up right in front of us, and there was a crack of the ball hitting her bat, which just and she hit by mistake. She hit one towards the Indian dugout, and it went so quick that the crowd reacted as oh because they thought it might hit somebody. So no, I mean, not just skill wise, but in terms of how complete the game seems now, as in the rough edges are tactical rough edges more than skill rough edges. I can't tell. There have been too many people who have felt out of place, and this is across the 8 teams, not just the best teams, but across the
Right.
8 teams. I'm a huge fan of loopy leg spinners or loopy spinners. So Nashra Sandhu, superb, great. I was hoping Alana King bowled slowish in the India game, but I think just the pitch made it impossible for her to loop it up because it was a flattish pitch. The Indian openers had done well. So she had to kind of dart it in a bit. But yeah, otherwise it's been a superb World Cup skill-wise. These guys are clearly up their game. And with the next iteration of WPL, BBL 100, we will see like from all three aspects, be it bowling, fielding, actually four if you include tactics, we'll see it reach a new level almost. I'm expecting for the next ODI World Cup, we'll see it get places that it isn't there yet.
Absolutely. Recently I was reading that women's cricket is now $1 billion industry, and that's obviously a great thing, and it's heading the right direction. One spinner that you didn't mention that I do want to talk about is India's Sri Charani, the 21-year-old,
Oh
who
yeah,
did
yeah.
an amazing job against the Australians.
Superb.
I didn't get a chance to watch her in some of the previous games, but yeah, she was on the money. She was bowling to the field, and yeah, it felt like even Elisa Healy, who was set and scoring at 115 strike rate. I think she went under 90 strike rate against her. So it was just very good tactical bowling, good control, and that was great to watch considering the due, considering the opponent and the situation.
I think from the Indian camp, she looked the only one in complete control. And this is not to kind of discredit the Indian bowlers. It was tough to bowl. You were bowling
Yeah.
against absolute gun batting team and a batting lineup that never ends. You were never getting a reprieve. Like when Elise Perry went out, Beth Mooney walked in and she gets out. That's at some point Talia McGrath walks in and McGrath comes in and she just starts hitting. And Talia McGrath is physically like massive. And so it's already a very imposing frame in front of you. And she just comes and she just starts hitting. And by that time, Elisa Healy's already reached 80, 90, whatever. So it was a tough bowling conditions. It was tough bowling conditions. It was a very hard to beat batting lineup. And Sri Charani was in complete control. If I may say so, she was the only one who seemed to be in sync with the captain in terms of the field placement and the angles. My biggest problem from the Australia game was between India and Australia was that there was no hold on what angles you bowl to a batter or a batting lineup or a batting, group, because for the most part, Australia just milked the chase. And that's kind of a red flag because it's okay to lose. It's absolutely all right. You're losing to the greatest team in your sport. But just the ease which Australia just went through that 330, that should raise a few alarms. And it came down to them having singles available to them all the time. And the boundaries were just pressure release shots. And there was no pressure built that they would feel compelled to hit a boundary. They could just take a couple of overs, say, okay, when we get the loose ball, we'll hit. So Sri Charani in that phase between, I think, overs 20 to 35, 36, between 17 to 35, 36, she was the only one who seemed to have the tempo under control, the fields under control. And the Australians gave her a lot of respect. They weren't trying to, whack her out of the ground. They took a few singles and they moved on to the other bowlers, which is the biggest compliment you can get, that in a 330 game, you went for, I think, 50 in 10 overs.
No, not even 50, actually. I think it was like 42 or for 3 or
42 something. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
outstanding bowling performance.
Yep, absolutely. And talking about the Aussies, I really don't get it. I don't really get it why. Like the Australian just, whether it's the men's or whether it's the women's, they just show up and they are just tactically ready. Now that we've had a lot of books written on the 2023 World Cup, we've read about how they were preparing from a strategy perspective. They were ready for targeting specific players who were not boundary hitters to stay in longer, things like that. And I think the women's are definitely the greatest team, like greater than the 2023 Australians, but possibly the greatest this sport has ever seen. And they are also similar, like in terms of tactics. They bowled. You mentioned a lot of teams are bowling on the stumps to the Indian openers, considering their strengths of freeing their arms, but they bowled a lot of slower balls. And then even when we talk about the great ODI batters of the, let's say, the last 15, 20 years, you will notice that their non-boundary strike rates is always up there. Even if they're not finding boundaries, they're finding singles, they're finding doubles, they're able to do that. And that's exactly what Healy and company did against India, even when Charney was bowling that spell. Apart from a couple of overs, one in maiden, I think, they always found those singles and were able to rotate. So yeah, just a team that is at another level. I don't think it surprises anybody anymore. I think it's if I was an Aussie fan, I would be like, "This is boring. You guys just win too easy every time." But do you think they have? There's, I guess, who can challenge the Aussies? Let me put it this way.
So about Aussie fans, let me get there. Who can challenge the? It's a tougher one, because how do you logically argue against a team that's now won 69 out of their last 76 ODIs, right, across 8 years? How do you logically make a case that they will lose a game? But in terms of the fans, there were a couple of travelers from Australia. I think one was from Brisbane, who's been watching, like who kind of watched cricket with when Belinda Clark was there and everyone. And the other one is fairly newer, but she was also, I think, similar age group. So they were sitting and behind us, and through the India innings, as the Indian total kept getting higher. At no point were they even panicking. And I kind of just turned around. I was like, "What do you think? This is usually a high territory of the scores." And their response, part sledge, I guess it was part confidence, was that if the girls in blue are getting this, the girls in yellow are definitely going to get this. I was like, okay, I can't argue against that. So I think something with Australian cricket that we don't recognize enough, and that's partly due to the way we are conditioned to see sport, is that in a high performance team, be it men's, be it women, when you think of the great teams, you think of these superstars who are to use a metaphor, burn right and burn long and whatever. The Australian cricket, uh, in both genders, they have had a team full of just high performance 7 on 10, 8 on 10 everyday performers, and a couple of these explosive guns. For example, something that Cummins said about Maxwell, and I read that in the foreword for Maxwell's autobiography, is that regardless of how Maxwell performs on a day-to-day basis, they're happy to carry Maxwell because the rest of the team is our percentage players. They will play the percentages. And that's how they are good at. That's what they're good at. And even a David Warner, when the big tournament comes, he's not lashing out blindly. He knows the territory. He knows where to go. So they don't do mercurial. Australia doesn't do mercurial at all. They do consistency. And at some point, one of them is going to lock in. Healy was speaking about that there's been a lot made of me not locking in, and I guess I was just a little more locked in this time. So Elise Perry went off with cramps. She came back, and at no point did she look like, okay, now a couple of wickets have fallen. Elisa is gone. The set batter is gone. I'm almost, after an hour break, I'm coming back to the crease. How do I navigate this? She just kept picking her singles, hit the odd boundary. So they got such a good idea about their game, and everything adjacent to the technical skills, whether it be, like you said, the tactical skills, whether it be mentally, just knowing, okay, we have encountered the situations enough to know exactly how to go, when to press the pedal, when to not press the pedal. There was a phase in the Indian innings where they were not necessarily going for the high heavens. Um, versus Atalia Magra came and clearly came with instructions from the dressing room that heave. You score 10 balls, 20, we're good. Just heave. So she heaved at pretty much everything. And that felt like a very planned kind of, a strategy. Um, I was looking at the numbers throughout, and obviously the 2017 event is big, especially from India because that was post the Harmanpreet 171. But even previously, it's not like they were their win percentage has never been kind of less than 75-80, which in any sport it's quite wild. For long periods, you can have one seasons
Right.
like the Chicago Bulls sixth season, that is an outstanding season. Or the closest that comes to it is Barca Femini, who went 4 or 5 seasons of the Spanish Women's Premier League, and they lost, I think, 3 games or 4 games in 4 seasons. So out of 120, they won 116 or something of that sort. There were a couple of seasons where they won 30 out of 30 games. So, barring that, I can't think of too many teams who had this kind of dominance. And what that kind of dominance brings is not just your best players playing well, but your support cast playing well. There are players who raise their hands up. I think, Mayank, you and I will remember the first game of the 2003 World Cup in the men's team, where Wasim Akram and Shoaib had reduced Australia to 53 for 4. And out comes Andrew Simons with a generational 150. Um, in that World Cup, twice they were 7 down, and Andy
Right.
Bickle had rescued them with the bat. In this World Cup, Pakistan had them 7 down. Who scores a 50? Alana King.
At number 10.
From number 10. And that's
Yeah.
not just, a crazy thing. That's the sign of a team at the absolute ceiling of what high performance should be, where not just your, Perry and Healy and your, the Beth Moonies are scoring 100. Your Ashley Gardner chips in with a century. Your Alana King chips in with the 50. Everyone can bat. Everyone can bat. Everyone can bowl. There are 7, 8 bowling options. There are your bat till 10. So it's a team that is just, um, it's a pleasure to watch them. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it. There is absolutely, and I'm very glad for it, that even within the fans there was no sort of animosity or that kind of anger you have towards a team that keeps beating you. There was a lot of reverence, a lot of respect. That how can you be so good? How can you be so complete? That 7 down, 8 down doesn't matter. You got this, and it reflected during the chase that they were never in trouble. They were never in under pressure. Forget trouble. They were never under
Right.
pressure. They had it under control. They're like, okay, we got this. No worries.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I completely agree with everything you said about the Aussies, and obviously it comes from multiple angles, right? One is, of course, one of the first teams to professionalize, so that gave the
Mm.
women a lot of, money, support systems, all of that, grounds, all of that to upskill. But the other aspect of it is, just sometimes we have these, a number of top players come together at the same time, and suddenly a strong team comes together. Those things happen naturally. So all of that has happened, but at the same time, the one other thing, and I've never been to Australia, by the way, but what I've heard from people who live there or who've been there is it's a very much a sporting culture. Every
Mm.
person is pushed to play a couple of sports at the very least, and that I think is such a big difference because you talked about they weren't going for every ball at certain stage of their innings, and that is a lot about match awareness, and I think that is something that comes from being a sporting culture. When you've watched the game, when you've analyzed the game, when you've talked the game all the time from your childhood, you have that understanding at a much earlier stage. Of course, executing it and all of that is a completely different completely different challenge, but having that awareness puts you so much ahead of somebody else at a similar age group or someone else from a different country. So I
Also, it's
just
very
yeah.
collective. It's sorry, it's,
Mhm.
it's it's very collective. Like Australia is, and I would say Australia and South Africa almost uniquely, and obviously New Zealand, but amongst the elite teams in men and women's cricket, the effort always seems to be towards the collective goal. And I can't remember too many Australian or South African players who have come across as, almost a bubble, even as great as they have been, almost a bubble that exists by themselves. And sometimes, the team has to work around them. It never is that way. It's always, even the best players kind of work around what the team tactics are, what the team goals are. Opening bowlers, fast bowlers will bowl third change, fourth change, no worries. Batters will change their batting lineups and favorite batting spots, no worries. Stroke makers will give up their stroke making to become these solid middle order batters. We've seen that so much in men's cricket, women's cricket. Alisa Haley is a reformed opener. She was not opening, I think,
Right.
post 2020. She was put back to open. Do you want to open? Because we have ample middle order options. She's like, why not? Let's do it. So I think that is a part of the Australian culture that you always, and I heard this, I don't know how much of that is true. Maybe your audience from Australia can help us understand if there is accuracy to this, is that when a kid in Australia plays a game, and it could be any sport, they come home, the first question asked is, did you win? And as you grow older in that atmosphere, that's almost your instinct to think that win comes first, my score comes second. And that's not to say that the other countries are more selfish. What I'm trying to say is the lens through which you view sport is almost like the collective first, everything else later. And which is why probably Australia is the only country from where we've seen senior players drop themselves. I think Clark being an example, Ponting saying that, okay,
Right.
maybe it's time to go, well before he retired. So, and you see, and they're able to drop players based on situations. They're able to play horses for courses at all points. That's something that we see always with Australian cricket teams, that they, there are phases when maybe a good team is not always very good. But you always see that their team is exactly what it should be for this situation. And that comes from a very objective, collective view of their culture.
Really well summed up, Sarthak. I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I do
Glad to
hope
be here.
you'll come back to the last wicket. I'm sure we'll find a number of different
100%.
cricketing topics to chat
Just say
about.
the word, I'll be here.
Perfect. To our listeners, we'll share Sarthak's credentials and his blog, his amazing blog, which I really do enjoy, as well as his Twitter account. With that, we'll be back soon. Thank you.
Thank you.